So hard to watch.
I wish I could do another movie like Clean Shaven.
It was so hard to watch, man.
But that was when you were talking about like coming from the inside. That was such a beautiful story. I mean, my opinion. I mean, I guess a lot of people, well, not many people saw the movie, but people would think, what do you mean a beautiful story? But to me, it was, because it was about a guy who was just gotten out of a mental institution. He was severely mentally handicapped, and the only thing that kept him was alive. The only thing that kept him from suicide was the thought of being with his daughter.
Right.
You know, and that's what kept him alive. So that was by far. I got to do that movie. So if I died tomorrow, I got to do that movie. Where, you know, it meant a lot to me to try to relay that. You know.
Hello and welcome to, I think this is going to be the final episode of $1 Million Day Player. I think that's where it's going to go in the episode list. My name is Amanda Mack, and this is a podcast that's dedicated to the incredibly talented and stupidly underrated Peter Greene. How it works is each episode, well, since this is the last episode, for the last several episodes, I have been picking a part of Peter's that is my favorite, and basically talking about it with a co-host who is a lot cooler than I am and a lot better at explaining stuff and can carry the episode. And in this episode, this final episode, I have Mr. Peter Van Pelt back with me. We had so much fun the first time that we had to do it again. So hi Peter, how are you?
Thank you. I feel like the only reason I'm good at explaining stuff is if you lived a life like me where you have to explain your choices to other people that didn't have any thought behind them, you get really good at like breaking down why you did what you did.
That's fair. That's fair. I've made very safe and very like you know, society friendly choices, so I've never had to really explain them very much. So
I've made choices like a old prospector that hit a silver vein, and he's come into town, and he's just doing stuff. He's not even thinking about it anymore.
Oh my God, amazing. So on this episode, we are talking about Clean Shaven, which is a film I think I have mentioned in every single episode of the podcast. I fucking love this film so much.
So many of my notes for this film were like, why is she making me watch this? Oh my God.
So that's kind of a perfect segue into kind of why I chose to have you on for the episodes that I did, because you are kind of in like a very interesting position, because you have been at both ends of Peter's sort of spectrum, like as far as roles go. Like you've seen him at his like scariest and most intimidating, but you've also seen him at like his most vulnerable and broken and just sort of you know, just a role that he's not really known for doing. He's not really known for appearing to be so just so emotionally distraught on camera. So I'm very curious to know exactly how Clean Shaven sort of played for you.
Well, like the comment I gave you yesterday when you were like, wow, what would you describe this in one word? And I said, like, I never want to time travel. Because this movie, because I don't know if the people that are listening have seen it or not, but if they haven't, it's a movie about a guy who is a paranoid schizophrenic who is released from the hospital, not cured or on meds or with any help at all, and goes to find his daughter, and things don't go well.
Yes. And
it just made me realize, like, so as bad as the state of like, you know, like mental health awareness and mental health care is today, was the movie supposed to take place in the 90s? Because I couldn't quite figure out a time frame. Yeah, so like the early 90s, I guess if they were like, you seem all right, they would just release you from wherever they were keeping you for mental health and then be like, have a good life. And then you would just drive around suffering from whatever it is you suffered from.
Right.
Like, it's Yeah.
And that was kind of the message I got too. And you know, the fact that he is released and he doesn't really seem to be cured at all or be managing it at all. They're just like, we need your bed, so bye.
Yeah, or in any way look like somebody who should just be driving a car and released under their own care. Like, he clearly is like, from the moment the movie starts, you go, oh, this ain't right. This guy's going through some things, and just nobody. And like, he doesn't talk for like the first 20 minutes of the movie, right?
Yeah, there's not a whole lot of talking at all. It's my favorite type of movie. It's a tiny, quiet, like I those are what I call those movies that don't have like a whole lot of talking, and the soundtrack is either just non-existent or is very suppressed or used sparingly, and it's, you know, very low budget. It was made for like $10 and a bag of Twizzlers.
One of my notes was just, this movie is auditorily uncomfortable.
Yeah, and of course that's completely on purpose.
Yeah.
Yeah, it is meant to feel crowded and just intrusive and violent. Because
they do a thing where they play the noises that are supposed to mimic what it's like to have schizophrenia, and but it's mixed with the ambient noises. So you're like, did I leave a radio on in the other room? I don't understand what I'm hearing right now.
Right. And I mean, and I think the radio noises, well, I know the radio noises were definitely, those came from him thinking that he had like a transmitter, you know, and a receiver inside of his body. And
then they'd even ask him that when he left the mental health place. They were like, hey, do you still feel like you have a transceiver in your head?
I don't know if they asked him that. I think they were just like,
no, they didn't. They just let him go. They were like, bye. Like
you look fine. You can walk. It's good. You're fine. So yeah, I find this movie harder to watch than like Pulp Fiction. And I think it's because he's in the whole thing. So it's Peter's performance is in the entire film, but also there's just a different kind of emotional kind of distraughtness that comes from watching this film. Like, it is literally an hour and 20 minutes of you just watching someone just suffer and not be able to really filter out the wiring, or the effects of the wiring of his brain, and his mom, she acknowledges that he's got some issues. But
that was so heartbreaking when he goes home and his mother doesn't know how to deal with him because she realizes that he still has schizophrenia. There's a line I wrote in my notes where she says, I see you're still not taking care of yourself, which for me was code for, oh, I see you're still mentally ill and I have no idea how to deal with it.
Right. And I got this impression that she also felt that maybe being super strict with him was going to like rewire him and make him normal again, and maybe it was this attempt to not coddle him and just and treat him in a way that made him not feel like he was damaged or broken, and it was just supposed to make him normal again. And it's like he needs help. He doesn't need you to pretend like you can fix him by kind of just being strict and kind of not ignoring the problem, but just kind of pushing it down, I guess. I don't know, but yeah, she was the most frustrating character of the entire film for me.
It reminded me a lot of, there's this movie, and if you ever want to just be horrified at a movie that's not unlike Clean Shaven but real, I think it's called Sunnybrook. It was Geraldo Rivera's first big break. Did you ever see this?
No, I've never even heard of that.
He basically took cameras and kind of bum rushed these mental health facilities in upstate New York in the 70s. Mm-hmm. And he just kind of shows up and goes in and films, because in the 70s, it was a lot like this movie where it's like you're either out wandering around with mental illness or you're locked up forever. And the videos and the imagery he got from this place, Sunnybrook, I think it was called, were horrifying. Like, people didn't have clothes on. They were just like sitting around, like there was no order or structure. You know what I mean? Like people weren't being fed right. And I'm just like, oh my God, that's what this movie Clean Shaven was like, bringing back memories of. We had to watch it in college for a class we were doing, and I was like, Jesus Christ. It jump-started a bunch of like mental health awareness stuff and like stuff for people with disabilities, but it was scarring.
I think I somewhat remember that now. I feel like I've seen clips of it, but I've never actually sat down and watched the entire thing.
Yeah, and it feels like the person that saw that were like, why don't we write a whole movie like that with Peter Greene as the main character?
Yeah, and well, Lodge Kerrigan, who is the writer and director of it, this is kind of his wheelhouse. He writes a lot of films about mental illness, and he also has a theme around children. Like,
right,
there's always sort of like some sort of relationship that needs to be repaired with a child that has sort of either kind of irritated a mental illness or is sort of perpetuating a mental illness. Like it is very revolved around mental illness and sort of missing out on a relationship with a child because of it. Lodge has another film called Keene, which I suggest going to see because or seeking out. It's phenomenal. It's not as sort of gritty and hard to watch as Clean Shaven is. Like Clean Shaven, he just fucking went in full force and it's so unapologetic and it doesn't take the easy way out of anything. It is very in your face, and it wants to make you as uncomfortable as possible with even the scene transitions were very jarring and sort of upsetting, and of course all the audio that we were talking about, which is supposed to simulate sort of being inside of Peter's head, and Peter's character is also named Peter in this, so if we call him Peter, we're referring to the character. I found the way they shot food in this movie was very upsetting and very unsettling to me. Really? Yeah, because the way they filtered it and the way they shot everything, I remember there's a scene where they're making a sandwich and he's cutting up a tomato at the table, and it just looks washed out and gross, and the lunch meat does too, and everything reminds me of my great grandmother's house, if that makes sense. Like it's all old and like it's clean, but it's super old and it looks gross, and you're like, I don't want to be here. Right. Yeah. Yeah. I mean, yeah, I think that could have been an example of sort of some sort of sensory reaction that he was having to being at his mother's house. So one of the things that I wanted to discuss, actually, watching this movie again, I've determined that I don't think the mother had any sort of mental illness. In my notes, like my first couple of times watching this for the podcast, I had seen this like a long time ago. But the first time I watched it for the podcast, I was I sort of wrote in my notes that I thought the mother had some sort of mental illness. Like she's very awkwardly sort of social in some of the scenes, like with the officer that comes by and
the officer, that was a whole nother weird left field. Like, what the fuck is happening right now? Yeah, the officer was I can't really speak my feelings about like what the officer represented, and I've tried to kind of, I don't know, I haven't really like reconciled like how the officer's actions and whatnot sort of feeds into, I guess, the conversation on mental illness, except for the fact that he, I think like everyone else, sort of sees Peter as some sort of immediate danger because no one really understands what he is going through. Because that's the way that like they treated people, and they still do in a lot of places. They treat people with mental illness as like their immediate danger. It's not a person that needs treatment. It's a crazy person. You know what I mean? Like I think he definitely represented that, because I mean, how many people that are having mental health crises get shot by the cops? You know what I mean? Right. Yeah. Like a lot. Like that's a very likely way for it to end if you have an episode and you don't have a support network. That's true. That's true. And I guess, spoiler warning, we're gonna kind of spoil Clean Shaven. It's been out since like 93, 94. So, but yeah, if you hadn't got the VHS, get on it. Right.
Right. Actually, there is a it's on Criterion Collection now. And so it's got like it's been fully like remastered, and it sounds amazing. It looks amazing. There's a lot of literature that sort of comes with it that explains, you know, the themes of the film and sort of Lodge Kerrigan's process to making it and why he wanted to make it and all that stuff.
It reminded me too. It reminded me a lot of One Flew Over the Cuckoo's Nest. The way that they depicted mental illness and people's reaction to it, like it was a thing not to be treated, but these people need to be locked away or put down, you know, like that kind of idea.
Right. And that's a theme that's sort of heavy, I think, with Lodge's films. The two main ones that I've seen, which is this one and Keene, those are sort of the main takeaways. I think it's less explicitly expressed in Keene. Clean Shaven is, you know, kind of goes right in, but yeah, there is another theme of just people misunderstanding whatever mental illness is being represented on film there, and did it take place? The movie was supposed to take place on like Vancouver Island, right? I'm not sure. I think it was supposed to take place somewhere in Jersey, maybe? I don't know. Because
the community too, like all the people he encounters, it reminds me a lot of I don't know, like you ride through these or see these places in the South where like everyone just looks beaten down and tired and just insanely unhappy, and I was like, oh my God, this is. Yep, definitely seen some communities like this before. Yeah, they definitely nailed that super small town sort of feel to it, like this sort of not really closed off, but definitely closed-minded small town that didn't have resources really to understand mental illness and really wasn't all that concerned about understanding mental illness. Like there's the librarian that just tells the biggest fucking lie about Peter being in the library. He goes to the library at some point to I guess look up records about his daughter, and that's where he finds out that she's been adopted, who he's looking for the entire film. I think we neglected to mention that. That's sort of I think we mentioned at the top, but yeah, he's trying to find his daughter.
Yeah, so he's been in the mental institution. He's trying to find his daughter, and his mother doesn't. I don't know if he knows that she's been given up for adoption or not.
I think his mother just says, I don't want you to find her, or something like that, and doesn't give him any info.
Yeah, that was kind of the impression I got, because he acted really surprised when he was at the library, and he goes into the adoption records and he sees her picture and has a hard time he has a hard time dealing with that, which he has a hard time dealing with every fucking thing in this film.
Well, yeah, because the man gets out of a mental institution and they're like, well, find your way, young man, find your way, go west.
But I did want to talk about the fact that I think his daughter ends up showing signs of schizophrenia as well. And it's hinted, for me, it was hinted at some of the actions of his mom, which, you know, the fact that she even gave her up for adoption, her reasoning was like, you know, have you ever watched your child deteriorate?
I don't want to do this again. Yeah.
Right. And also when the daughter comes to the house, I guess to maybe wait for Peter, with the adoptive mother, she says, "Oh, I see you're turning into a very quiet child." And earlier, she had been explaining to the police officer that he was very quiet. That her son was very quiet when he was younger, and obviously that's when things started. That's probably when his mental illness started to really get bad, is when he got really quiet and he like went on that crazy diet that she talks about, where he thought he was getting really fat, and so he like lost 20 pounds in a really short amount of time. So I think it was starting to sprout then.
So you're supposed to be led to think that he kills a little girl in the beginning of the movie, right?
Right. Yeah. There's it's weird. There's so many parts to this movie. But it's clearly like a character study. It's I see it mislabeled as a psychological thriller a lot, and
not really, unless you're counting that one, like, he might have killed a kid, but, like, no, it's not really that. Like, I wouldn't say there's a cat and mouse game between him and that creepy detective.
Right. No, yeah, not as much as it is obviously not like a main element of the film. It is not played up to feel like this is the thing you come for. You know, it's definitely just about watching Peter struggle in this world that he no longer really understands, and maybe he had stopped understanding it a long time ago, around the time his mental illness really got bad, or maybe being locked up made it even worse. Like, maybe he went in and he wasn't as bad off, but he was bad off enough for people to want him locked away.
Right.
And then he just became worse in treatment.
I got confused. Was it the mother of the adopted mother of his daughter, or the mother of the girl that got killed that the detective asked out for dinner?
It was the mother of the adoptive daughter.
Because that was super weird. Like, he thinks Peter Greene is killed, and so he's looking for him, and then, like, he just kind of, like, meets the Peter's daughter's adopted mom, and it was like, you want to go out? And then they have real awkward, like, 1950s sex, and you're like, well, this is weird.
I'm pretty sure there was some deep art school meaning to that scene, but or maybe it was just to give you just a break. I don't know. It's such a heavy film.
Or maybe just like it was just one of those weird, I guess maybe Oedipus type messages where it's like, and now he's taken the adopted mother too because he's the alpha detective.
Yeah.
He's a real like man's man, like Robert Mitchum, just like, I'm looking for a crazy person. Also, would you like to go out? So they think he did it, because I had to go back and read about this movie after I watched it, but like, the idea is that you're supposed to think that he killed the little girl, but the filmmaker, what's his name, said that he never actually gives you any evidence that he did it. So it's like, when you're watching the thing, I guess you're supposed to be like, am I the detective too?
Right. I think I read that same. I think I read the same article you did, and Lodge he did say that, like, you know, there's no evidence that Peter ever harmed this girl, but also shame on you if you think he did it.
I wanted to argue from it. I wanted to argue that, though, like, okay, I get his point, but like, if I'm watching a movie and the protagonist like stops the car next to a little girl, and then like we hear screams, and then he's putting a bag in the back of the car. Yeah, sure, there's no direct evidence, but he is the protagonist of a film, and a child was just heard screaming. I assume he had something to do with it.
I don't think that scream happened. I think that's
the other thing.
Yeah. I think
what's real and what's not in this movie. Yeah, I didn't know what was actually happening. Like, they did a really good job of what I assume it is like to be schizophrenic. Like, we're like, I don't even know what the fuck's real anymore. This is a lot of stuff happening.
Right. And I say that I don't think the scream was real because when he drives away, there's a very quick shot of a guy that's in the background that has obviously seen everything, and he is not reacting at all. So,
right.
So I don't think anything happened. I think he might have like gotten out of the car, and maybe because he got out of the car, like that was the one thing that just kind of scared her away, and she was like, oh shit, and she like ran away. And nothing really happened. And then he, had the they gave him a very conveniently shaped bag that he puts into his car that kind of is in the shape of a child, of like a dead child. So
that's my argument. He's like, I didn't give you any proof. I go, he put a dead child shaped bag in his trunk, buddy. That kind of makes me suspicious. Right. Yeah, that was it. It was one of those things where I was like, he probably should have just wrapped that differently, and it would have been okay. Yeah. That's why I was suspicious. Not because I'm like, oh, he's mentally ill. He put a body-shaped bag in his trunk.
Actually, I had a moment where I didn't even think the gun that he had was real. I thought that was in his head, too, because there's a scene where he pulls over the car and he takes the gun out And he's like on a highway, and there are other cars passing by, and he takes the gun out and he aims it, I guess, just to kind of, test it out or have it in his hands. And like a car just sort of drives past him and doesn't react to it at all. And so in my head, I'm going, well, maybe like the gun isn't real and all this is in his head too. But then the end, like after this cop has shot Peter, he goes to the trunk and he takes out the gun and he shoots it to sort of make it to cover his tracks, to make it sound like he got fired at first before
which seemed weird for the 90s because, cops kind of have blanket immunity a lot of times anyway. I was like, was it even necessary, like, to say that he fired at you? Couldn't you just be like, he was mentally ill, and then everyone would have been like, oh, okay.
Right. Yeah. That would have been that would have been fucked, man. I would have hated that.
I feel like that was life of the 90s for people that had mental illness. They're like, yeah, but sometimes his blood sugar gets low, so we shot him.
Right. And
everyone would be like, all right, you're clear to go. This whole movie to me, because I really don't like flying, and this whole movie had the same feeling to me of like when I have to get on a plane and how uncomfortable I am and like my skin is crawling and I'm just like, I don't want to be here in any of this. This is super uncomfortable.
Yeah, it does such a great job of putting you in that place where you're super uncomfortable. And I've actually I have on purpose not watched this movie a whole lot over the years, because when I did watch it some years back, it just made me so heartbroken and so uncomfortable.
Absolutely.
It is a soul destroying film,
and it just makes you upset about, like, just in general, like even in 2019, like how we treat people who are having like mental health crises. It's like, and also makes you feel helpless. Like what am I supposed to do when I see like a schizophrenic guy at the subway? What am I supposed to do? You know what I mean?
Right.
Like it's like I'm helpless, he's helpless, we're all fucking helpless here.
Right. And I had those moments too where it definitely made me question my own reaction to people who clearly have mental illnesses and it's like, what am I supposed to do? Like what can I do to in this situation, like, with what I'm given, like what do I do?
When you see a guy dragging a child-shaped body bag down the side of the road, what do? You're naturally going to be suspicious, but do you have all the facts?
Right. Like, I mean, you just don't want to start pointing fingers because he has a mental illness. I mean, that's awful. So, I don't know.
But it also doesn't feel like anybody really talks to him in this movie, which is also a weird thing that they kind of do to him.
Right. And I was actually going to bring that up because the only person that really talks to him and doesn't make him feel like he should be, under just locked away and ridded of it from society is his daughter, because he does actually he eventually does get to his daughter, and he kind of it's the only he gets to play father for like 15 minutes, but she just sort of talks to him and like a person, and and she's actually the only one that he's totally open with, because he tells her about thinking that he has the transmitter and the receiver in him, and he does not say that to his mom, anyone else he comes into contact with. He knows
his mom doesn't even his mom doesn't even talk to him. She talks at him like he's a little child still.
Right. Yeah, but and I mean that was enough for him to be like, I can't express these things, because even though he's mentally ill, I think he knows how he comes off to other people, so he's not going to drop that bombshell on anyone that he thinks he's being tracked via a transmitter and a receiver. But there's that really sweet scene of he ends up taking his daughter to the beach, and there's that really sweet scene where he's finally like connecting with someone. He's telling.
To be fair though, he had kidnapped his daughter from her adopted mother. Just that's happening in the background while he's connecting with his daughter.
Yes, that's true. We're gonna overlook that fact. I'm
not demonizing. I'm just saying, like, as much as I hate the detective, I'm like, he has a history of mental illness, and he did kidnap a child. Just that is happening in the movie, like, as we're going along.
Yeah, That's true. I find that part a lot easier to forgive because of how he is treated in the rest of the movie. And and I know that doesn't justify anything, and that shouldn't be anything that I'm using to make up for the fact that he does commit a crime. But
I had a question too. Did he really cut his own fingernail off, or was that a delusion?
I think that's a good question. I think
because the same thing in the earlier on in the when he's in the shower, he cuts a piece of his scalp off to get the transmitter out, and he doesn't seem to have any ill effects from it. Does he the rest of the movie?
That's true.
I'm wondering if even that's real, if he's even actually self-harming, or if that's part of the delusion as well.
It could be. I did think about the transmitter him not actually taking out the transmitter that way.
Because he doesn't have like a giant bloody scar on his head, and he didn't seem to do anything else to it. So,
well, he did. There was the blood in the sink. Remember, the officer stays in the hotel room that he stays in, like on his way out of the mental facility or on his way back home, and there is blood in the sink.
Right.
And so I think he actually did. And actually, now that I think about it, in the very end of the movie, after Peter is killed and the officer takes his car back to the police station, his fingernail is sitting on the dashboard.
Okay, so that did, I was yelling at because I looked down at something when that scene started, so I missed the beginning of it. I looked back up and I was like, "Oh my God! No, he's cut off his fingernail! Oh God, Jesus!" And he doesn't like flinch. He's just very calmly, like, cutting out his fingernail, I guess, to get to another transmitter. I'm like, oh God.
In that scene, in an interview with Sissy, is actually the clip I did not use at the top of this episode. But in a clip, there's Peter talking about doing research. Actually, that clip is actually not with Sissy. It's with Mandy Del Rio from the Indie Lounge. I'm all over the place right now. So he talks about doing research for Clean Shaven at Bellevue Hospital and seeing one of the patients do that. Not with her fingernail, but seeing a patient like cut open their leg and not showing any sort of flinching to them doing it. And so he said that him and Lodge sort of got into a disagreement about it because he had seen this woman like cut open her leg and not show any sort of emotion, and maybe Lodge like wanted him to have some sort of recognition of what he was doing and some sort of acknowledgement of the pain that he should be feeling. But yeah, so I'm guessing that maybe is something that is a part of that condition,
Yeah, like you don't realize how you're hurting yourself. This movie reminded me a lot of, you remember Bug?
Oh yes, I do.
It reminded me a lot of Bug, where they're also going through like paranoid delusions about like transmitters and stuff like that.
Yep. I haven't watched that movie in a while, but yeah, I definitely remember that. Yep.
I was gonna say, I think that anybody that wants to have a better understanding of mental illness or like what it's like should definitely watch this movie. Like, because like I said, it was revealing. It reminded me a lot of I can't remember if it was Wolf Blitzer or who it was. They somebody that was doing research on schizophrenia came up with this audio track that basically mimics. They interviewed a lot of people to get it right to what it's like to have schizophrenia. Mm-hmm. And then it was like Wolf Blitzer or Anderson Cooper, one of these guys, put on the earbuds and basically had a laundry list of stuff to go out and try to do. Like, if you have schizophrenia, he's trying to apply for a job and he's trying to fill out the application with these earbuds in, playing this track, try to like talk to people and do other stuff, and like just how difficult it is with just that. You're mentally fine, but just the audio track of that playing in the back of your head the whole time.
Right.
It was like they couldn't do it. They couldn't complete the tasks.
This film is it's heartbreaking. Like I think that's like the most I can say about it. I mean, well, we've said a lot about it, but I think emotionally that sort of just sums it up for me. It is it's soul destroying. Like as I said earlier, it's not an easy watch, and it's not something I would suggest watching a lot, because I think it just wears you down emotionally if you watch it too much. And like I said, I've purposefully not watched this movie a whole lot. I've collectively watched it about 4 times, and Peter's performance in this is, if you haven't gathered by now, he's incredible in this. He is absolutely just otherworldly. He is he's amazing. I love pointing to this movie, especially, like I said, that was sort of reason I wanted you to sort of do the episodes with me that you did, because you kind of see him at sort of both ends of the spectrum.
Oh, I was gonna say, because you know that I prefer to watch guys getting flushed down a giant cartoon toilet. I'm like, that's the Peter Greene I like, and you're like, that's cool. Well, enjoy this romp through anxiety-ridden mental illness that ends with a man getting shot by a detective wrongfully.
No, I wanted like a real world example of someone who had only seen Peter in like a handful of things, and that he had been like the villain in those things, or the bad guy, and then sort of pairing that with what I consider the best thing Peter's ever done. So I think to wrap this up, unless you had anything else you want to say about Clean Shaven.
I don't. Did they actually say what happened to his daughter, or the cop just shoot her dad in front of her and then was like, back to your mom?
Yeah, and I think that poor girl's gonna have a lot of therapy to go through.
Not in this world, because there is no therapy. Hey man, you look okay, I guess, out of the mental health ward, back into society with you.
Yeah, I'm guessing that's what happened. I'm guessing the officer just kind of took her back to her adoptive mother, because the very last scene in it, which is fucking heartbreaking too, and as far as child actors go, like this girl, I forget what her name is, but she was great. Like, she didn't have a whole lot of lines or anything, but I thought she was exactly what she needed to be, as far as like cast, alongside Peter, who just says so much in his face and in his actions, and he kind of takes over the scene whenever he's in it. So she did as much as she was required to do it, and she did it well. But the very last scene is she is talking into this radio that's on a boat, and she says something like, "Daddy, are you there? Daddy, are you there?" And that, I guess that was an allusion, of course, back to him telling her that he had the radio and the transmitter.
So maybe it'll be a nice, like, I can always talk with my dad on the transmitter in his head.
Right. Yeah.
I'm trying to put a nice bow on this, because it ends so sad and raw, and like there's no help for any of us. Right.
Yeah, it is. When you messaged me, actually, like after you were done watching it, and you said the bit about not ever wanting to time travel, but you also said something about like going to watch The Mask and like go re-find your happiness, and I said there is no happiness after this. Like you're just sad forever. Like that's just the nature of this movie. It sucks the joy right out of you. There is no room for joy after you watch this movie.
I think it also pops the bubble of like, what would happen to me if my friends and family, my support network, were gone and something happened to my mental health. You know what I mean? Like,
right.
Well, you get fucking shot by a cop. Like, that's what happens.
Yeah, that's true. So yeah, that is Clean Shaven. I definitely suggest watching this film, especially if your experience with Peter Greene has been more, him playing the antagonist or bad guys, or just, drug dealers.
I think watch it with a friend, so you got someone to hug at the end, man.
Yeah, that's a good note.
Maybe a dog or a cat you can pet and be like, you'd never leave me if I went crazy, would you?
Right. It's it's not an easy watch at all. It's yeah, I don't even know in my lifetime how many times I will watch this film because it just takes so much out of me. And again, I love this film. This film is such a 180 from what people think about Peter when they think about him in roles, and you just don't get a whole lot of opportunities to see him be like this level of vulnerable on screen. Like whenever he is on screen, he's the baddest motherfucker in the room. So yeah, I think seeing him this way is it's worth a watch just to get like the flip side of Peter's talent and his ability. But just know that it's gonna suck a lot out of you emotionally. You're not gonna leave this happy. you're gonna think about this movie a lot. It's gonna stay with you, and it's definitely gonna make you question a lot of things. So I think this is where we're going to wrap up the episode. I want to give you a chance, though, Peter, to shout anything that you're working on or any sort of social media stuff.
Well, if you want to ever check out my other podcast, Those Muckrakers, we talk about the news and why it makes us upset. You can also follow us on Twitter. I think it's at Those Muckrakers. Or we've been trying to get people to send us their Dear Abbeys so we can give them advice on the podcast. And I always tell everybody, send us an email at thosemuckrakers@gmail.com, and we will read your email and answer your questions on the podcast.
Nice. Do you feel like you guys give really good advice?
I think so, although we did have a segment last time that we just called "What a Bitch." Where we gave some advice. I think we give pretty decent advice, but then that became a discussion about like, wait, who's the bitch in this story? We were trying to decide between me, the narrator, or the other person in the Dear Abby, and I think we decided that it was there was enough to go around. We were all being bitches about it.
Nice. Well, thank you so much, Peter, for joining me for this episode to talk about Clean Shaven and risking your own mental health to help make this episode.
Well, thanks for having me, and tell everybody to tune in next time when we do Blue Streak. Art house film or just avant-garde.
So that's it. That's the podcast. Holy shit. Thank you so much for listening. Even if this is like the only episode you listen to, thank you for listening to one episode. I did not ever think that I would actually get to do this podcast. You know, it was something that I sort of mused about on my Facebook, and it wasn't because I didn't think it was possible. I knew it was. I just didn't know what the context or what the content of the podcast would actually be. Doing a podcast about Peter's life was sort of out of the question because there's just not really a whole lot about him out there, and I feel like that is very intentional on his part, and I felt like doing any sort of podcast where I was digging around and trying to find out information about him, I didn't think that was a really great way to honor him. But I knew that talking about his films and talking about his work would be a good way to sort of show my appreciation for Peter. And I started reaching out to people and asking them if this would be something they would be interested in doing. And it is the yeses of those people that motivated me to actually do it, because I knew I couldn't do it by myself. So Quatoya Murray and Phil Keeling, Peter Van Pelt, Ryan and Brandy Coach, Alicia Briscoe, thank you all so much for taking on this project and making my mission to put some love for Peter Greene into the world your mission as well. I literally couldn't have done this podcast without you guys. In addition to that, thank you to Sissy Gamache, who graciously let me use the clips from her show. But on top of that, she also let me mispronounce her name for 2 or 3 episodes. I actually told Sissy that the episodes that had gone out, I had mispronounced her name, and she was so like, whatever about it. She was so cool. I originally just wrote Sissy to get permission to use clips, and she's become such a positive light and energy in my life in such a short period of time. So thank you so much, Sissy. Also, thank you, Mandy Del Rio of the Indie Lounge. She was very gracious about letting me use her clips from her interview with Peter a couple of years back, and she just had nothing but good things to say about Peter and her time interviewing him. And so she put a lot of positive energy into this when she found out what I was doing and why I wanted the clips. So thank you so much, Mandy. Also, Scam Dust, you know what you did. Hopefully by the time this episode goes out, I'll be thanking you in person. And just to everyone who offered any sort of motivational kind of words about what I was doing, because I've never done a podcast like this before. So I really didn't know how this was going to turn out. I didn't know what the quality was going to be. And I didn't really know what it was going to sound like in the end. And I really cared about the numbers at all. I really just wanted to get something positive and show some love for Peter Greene, because he's been a part of my life for such a large amount of my life. So yeah, just thank you for anyone who ever said good job, or this is so cool what you're doing. You helped you helped keep this podcast on target, and you helped it happen. In the episode 0, I said I didn't know why I had such an urgency to do this podcast. Somewhere around the time I did the Laws of Gravity episode with Phil Keeling, I think I figured it out. As I was looking up interviews and articles on Peter to write the episode 0, the most prominent things that came up were articles about Peter's battles with addiction. I don't pretend like that stuff didn't happen, but I knew to click around those links because that doesn't define who he is for me. But as I spoke with Phil and he talked about what he had found out about Peter in his research for the episode, I realized that other people were also coming across these results, and for them, they were defining who he was. Not only that, but there was a chance it was informing their opinions of his talent. That was the urgency I was feeling. The algorithm. I wanted my podcast to interrupt that. I wanted it to appear ahead of at least one article that dedicated more time and keystrokes to his past than to his body of work. And then, a few days before recording episode 5 with Brandy and Ryan, something I couldn't have ever predicted happened.
We got some video now of a huge brawl that broke out. I guess it's not a huge brawl. It was only 2 people, but man, it was vicious. On a New York City street corner. This is in Soho. 2 women, for various reasons, according to witnesses, just started going at it until a Hollywood actor named Peter Greene. You know him from Pulp Fiction. You know him from The Mask. He's played the villain in a lot of things. He played Zed in Pulp Fiction. But he happened to walk by, and then while everyone else was watching what was going on,
jumped into action.
He jumped in.
Hey, stop fighting! Stop right there, man. Hey, don't, no, stop fighting. Stop her! Stop her with the red! Let her go. Yo, stop her with the red! Let her go. Stop it! Stop it! Stop it! This is necessary. Stop! Stop! Why do you get people to stop it? What's the matter with you? You let him fight? You're a grown man. No, tell you! Stop the fight between 2 women! Stop it! Get a man of you! How come they not stop it? Stop it!
Peter pulling apart 2 girls that were fighting in NYC is now the first thing that appears in search results for his name. Just as I said in the episode 0, Peter Greene didn't need this podcast. He changed his own algorithm, and he did it in a way that I couldn't have. This podcast was only designed to showcase how great of an actor he is. That's technically the only thing I can speak on since I don't know him. what he did showcases how great of a person he is, and that's so much more valuable than anything about his career, especially in times like these. So yes, go out and see all the movies discussed in the episodes because they're all worth watching. But also, if you see him out in the world somewhere, shake his hand and let him know that you know his greatness extends past his film roles.